All right. Call this meeting to order. We have a number of people on the call today. A number of them are for part of our conversation. For counselors, we have myself, J.R. Smith-Koo, Counselor Anton Moody, Counselor Kelly Swearingen, and Counselor Tim Kennedy, all present. I don't see Craig on here, so he must be either trying to get in or must be indisposed at the moment. So we'll go from there. We also have a number of other, the number of guests, they'll all introduce themselves at a later time. So we will move on to the open forum. So it's my understanding that there are open forum items for tonight, or are we going to deal with that later down in the agenda? Mike, okay, there you are.
I think that's up to you all. There certainly are items that I would say classify as open forum and that people will expect to have you at least acknowledge whether or not you want to add them to the agenda. If you want to do that now, or if you want to push that off until after we've dealt with the Highway 61 on the agenda itself, I guess I'll leave up to the council.
Well, let me summarize a few of the public forum things that I have received. There's a number of them. One of those, probably the most benign of them, is that the owners of the Mayhew were wondering if they could donate a picnic table. So that's something that we can follow up with them on, and have a policy conversation about that in City Hall. There was another open forum about a public right-of-way conversation that's happening on 2nd Street and 4th Avenue West. So that's one thing we could talk about that. There's also I've had a few people contact me in regards to COVID-19 and the reaction from visitors, wondering about if there's more that we can do about that. So there's a number of things, and then also what is the city's reaction to the murder of George Floyd and the movement that's currently going on for equal rights and Black Lives Matter and that movement. So those are the ones that I have compiled from the messages that I've received over the past week or two. So does that seem like the list, number one? And number two, do we want to bring these things up later in the meeting, or do we want to, how do we want to deal with this? Because usually in an open forum we acknowledge them, and then we choose to add them to an agenda at a later date if that's what we see as necessary. So, Anton?
Yeah, let's do the Highway 61 update, and then we'll all take the time we need to do to talk about those other things.
Does that sound all right to everybody? Okay, so we'll do that. So we're just basically going to move the open forum conversation down. So let's keep moving through. We have the consent agenda, which has the 3 typical things on it. This meeting agenda, so if we have any additions, we need to put it on here now. The previous meeting minutes, the payment of bills, and we have a number of memos from the Parks Department, the liquor store, and from the library for hires. So unless we would like to pull one of those for discussion, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Yeah, Jay, can we also put an additional item on the agenda for the extension of that ordinance, which was supposed to expire today?
The sidewalk dining ordinance?
Yeah. Yes, please.
Tim, I thought that might fit nicely in the emergency update agenda item.
Okay, if once we're under that, then that's fine.
Okay.
With that, then I would make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, so there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion and a second. We'll go through our roll call vote. Anton, your vote?
Aye.
Kelly, your vote?
Sorry, aye.
Tim, your vote?
Aye.
And I am an aye as well. Consent agenda passes. So then we will move on to our update. So with that, I don't know who exactly wants to take this away. We've got a bunch of the names here that we deal with. We've got Brad from LHB. We've got Dan Shaw. We've got well, where did he go now? He was around here. Where's Ed? Ed Welch is here as well. And of course, we've got our own wastewater treatment facility guys here too. So I don't know who wants to start, but take it away.
I guess as the project engineer, unless one of you guys wants to, I can kind of give a rundown of what the situation is. And then LHB, Brad and Dan, I assume if the council has any more technical questions about the changes that were proposed and started working on, you can back us up with technical details on what the redesign was, and then yeah, go from there. So essentially the issue that is being discussed is the sanitary sewer that is running underneath the box in front of my sister's place there. So the box culvert, we're replacing that. The sanitary sewer and the water main needed to be replaced / realigned underneath that box. And then would be tied into a structure with a manhole up top that was planned to terminate the new sanitary sewer right next to the dentist's office there. And once we got into the field, we found that the elevation of that structure was too high to where even if you ran a minimum grade on that sanitary sewer line back up underneath the box, we would be running into the bottom of the box. And therefore, we need to look at what we could do to essentially lower that to fit the sanitary sewer under the box culvert, because the flow lines are pretty well dictated on box culverts, any sort of culvert, and that's the elevations on that are kind of set in stone. So it's really the utilities underneath that needed to go down a bit more in order to fit underneath there. So any questions about so then in order to lower it, to lower that structure enough to chase it back upstream, essentially in the sanitary sewer line, we also needed to replace and lower or flatten the run down to a structure that is in 3rd Avenue East. And that's the additional 193-foot run of 8-inch sanitary sewer that's being called into question here. I don't know if Brad or Dan, you want to add any more technical details to that, or if the council has any more questions about the nature of that work.
I don't have anything to add immediately. I mean, I'm happy at any point here for Dan and I are to answer the questions if there are any at that point.
Okay.
So maybe hearing no questions, you can continue at the resolution side of it, I guess.
Well,
So then,
I'll just jump in a bit here just to make sure that we summarize appropriately. So what you just asked is that's the reality of what we're facing. Like that's what we found in the ground. That's what we know we have to do to accomplish this section of the project. And there's a lot of potential for like, well, how did this happen? How did well, not necessarily how did this happen, but how did we not know about this? Blah 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 blah. But we're not there. I don't think that that's really a super productive way of having this conversation. So, like, if that's where we're at, if that's what like the information that you wanted to get across to us, I think that was successful. So,
Can I ask a question? So, am I correct that so from that east side of town, things like coming out of the new Gunflint, those things are running to the west towards where it takes the turn down towards the sewer plant? So
Correct.
do we know? I mean, I'm always amazed watching how the project is going, how they can figure out what they're going to hit next when they're doing a spot at a time. Do we know like what the implications are of making this change until we get further to the west? Or is it kind of, do you guys have enough of that opened up to be able to know that, you know, if we lower this here and we drop our grade, that we can get down to that new enclosure? And I'm not saying this is going to be like the only thing that comes up, but as far as that section, like this seems like the best way to solve it. Basically, like it's not going to create something further down the line where we're now all of a sudden, you know, our grades dropped. I mean, you were saying 190 feet, right? I don't know if sanitary runs a 1/4 inch per foot, but that's obviously pretty. That's you know, that's dropping quite a bit. So that's my question.
Yeah, Dan, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that. My take looking at it is that basically there's a manhole over by 3rd Avenue East that is the connection point of opportunity that we have, and that is the point we're connecting to. So there are no, so to speak, downstream effects or effects to the system beyond 3rd Avenue East. It's really taking this portion of the pipe between the manhole that is immediately east of the box culvert near my sister's place and adjusting the pipe grade to get to that point of connection opportunity at 3rd Avenue East. And that's it. So that's the system change, and there should be no ancillary or.
It's better it happened on that side of town with fewer distance to run, right? Versus happening over on 8th Avenue West or something, and how everything was dropped throughout the system, right? I mean, it's not a good situation, but it's better, maybe.
So we'd be optimistic.
Less distance to go, continue to drop.
Yeah, I mean, we are fortunate that it's relatively close. I mean, typical runs between manholes are 300 to 400 feet, and so it was, in the grand scheme of things, it was fortuitous that that we had this connection point. But I mean, that literally is just the elevation that we could tie into with this gravity main. So fortunately, we were able to find it.
Okay, thank you.
Anton, it's running at much less than a 1/4 inch per foot as well. It's at minimum slope. It's less than a half a percent per foot. So.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yep. So then I guess moving forward from there, the city, Mike Roth or whoever in discussion with LHB on this redesign had voiced that the $325 per lineal foot contract unit price for the 8-inch sewer main is high, and we would like to renegotiate on that, which I'm in agreement as MnDOT that is a high price, and that since we are in a change condition, you know, that provides us the opportunity to try and renegotiate. So the standard change process that we have to follow as MnDOT is, first we see if we can get it done for contract unit prices if both MnDOT and the contractor agree to paying for it with contract unit prices. As we're all aware here, we would not like to do that if possible, because it's $325 a lineal foot, which for 193 feet is $62,725. And that's quite a chunk of change to swallow. So then if contract unit prices can't be agreed upon for a change, then it goes to a negotiated price is the next step in line. And then if a negotiated price cannot be reached, that's an agreement between the contractor and the state. Then it goes to force account, which is time and materials, essentially paying for the materials needed to be used, the equipment, and the labor. And that's tracked individually for each piece of equipment, each person that's working on the work to get the essentially the rework done on this, or the extra work in this case. And so far, we have been tracking it in case, it goes to that force account route. Typically, I am hesitant, and the state is hesitant to go to that level of force account because generally there are risks associated with it. However, in this case, KGM, I asked them to propose some sort of negotiated cost, or to essentially rework a cheaper price on that 8-inch sanitary sewer, or the work in general related to getting this extra work done. And they came back to me just recently, about 20 minutes before the meeting here, they are proposing a $17,500 lump sum discount off of that, essentially $62,000 price.
So Ed, explain to me then how that works. Is that because we have the contract unit of $325 a square foot. So they're saying that they'll do a discount of $17,500 off of that. How does that actually play into the budget process then? Because I'm assuming then that that's what the new cost becomes if we agree to it.
This is the cost for this extra work. So this 193 lineal feet run, which is extra work.
Right.
So the other stuff that we talked about a couple meetings back, when they went and looked about lining and all that stuff, right? Like we didn't change that. So like we'll still, the rest of the project will still be the 325.
Correct.
Agreed upon, but it's just this, they're going to discount it from 325 to whatever that rate comes out to.
Yeah, it is.
82 feet or whatever.
In talking to Andrew, I think we ran the quick math and it was like still 230 something a lineal foot.
I guess my question for that then, my question is more so, what kind of guarantees do we have that it's not going to end up costing us $325 a square foot in that agreement? Because it seems to me like the way we've talked about this contract in the past is that all of those estimates were basically, like a guess, and that what the actual expense of doing it is going to be what the city pays for in the end anyway. So perhaps I read it wrong, but that's what I'm curious about.
So I guess the $325 a lineal foot is the contract, the contract unit price for that pay item. It's part of the overall bid package that was accepted. So when the bid package was accepted, because as a total package, the KGM's bid was deemed to be an acceptable bid in total. That was the accepted price as a part of the package. So I guess, Andrew, I don't have much more to say about that. I don't know what.
So I guess, yeah, this is Andrew Deming. I'm the resident construction engineer out of the Duluth office. So if the question is, how can we be sure that what is paid is not $325 per foot? There's two routes that we have. As Ed explained, first it's contract unit prices that the city would, we'd write the change order and the city would pay $325 a foot. There's concern there with the high contract unit price. We understand that. Second would be negotiated. So now KGM's proposing to Ed, just before the meeting, that they're proposing for this site specifically, just the 193 additional feet, that they'd reduce their price to just over $234 a foot. So if the city accepts that, you can be guaranteed that the 193 feet will be paid at $234 per foot, but just for that 193 feet. The only reason that we can negotiate a lower price is because this is additional. So it would have no effect on any of the sanitary that's currently in the plan. The last option, well, I guess the second option at this point is force accounts. So what Ed was speaking to there is force account. We don't like to go to immediately because it is a risk. The contractor can perform this work and we pay time and materials, and that may be under the $234 a foot. We believe it would be under the contract unit price of $325 a foot, but the way the contract will be written is that we are agreeing to force account. So if for whatever reason that price ends up being more than $234 a foot, or the price ends up being more than the $325 a foot, that's what we would sign to agree to. So that's the risk with force account, is you're looking ahead. All you're agreeing to is that you're going to pay for the hours of work and the material. So that's the risk with force account.
Yep.
I don't know, Jay, if that answers your question.
Do you know how far they got today of that? I mean,
yeah, so I was just going to speak to that. They started essentially this morning digging from that structure in 3rd Avenue East, working back upstream towards the one near the dentist office there. So essentially working on this 193-foot section directly itself, because that's what they needed to do to keep progressing. And they were saying that if they didn't start work on it, they'd be delayed and they would have to move their crew to another location. So I gave them the authorization to go ahead and continue doing the work that needs to be done to not incur a delay. But they ended up getting approximately half of it, I think, done. Last time I talked to my inspector in the field was about an hour ago, and he said that the last time that he had seen it, about 5 minutes before talking to me, they had already at least a third in the ground and backfilled, and they were working on trenching beyond that, and they were starting to put sticks in the ground of the pipe, which then would be rapidly approaching half. So I'd feel comfortable saying they got at least half of the run done today, and I would expect it to, if it goes as smoothly as it did today, be done tomorrow. They would be to the structure that we were originally supposed to tie into, and that would be the extent of that force account on that 193 lineal foot run.
So you don't know yet. I mean, it's probably not reasonable to ask the question, but you don't know necessarily what the T&M has added up to today for that half run, but
correct. It's hard to put an exact number on it yet, and that's the risk that Andrew was speaking to with in regards to force account, is that, you know, there can be unknowns that come up during force account. But I have I guess a hunch, so to speak, that with how smoothly and quickly it is going, I don't think that it would come up to that 325 a foot for sure. That's, like I said, there's no guarantees, but I get the feeling that it's going well and smoothly.
Can you hear me? I'm Tom Nelson. I want to give a little quick thing. The line is going in pretty good. But part of this also is changing the structure. They got to dig it up. They got to lower it, drill new holes in it. We're doing that because the one by the dentist's office, because if we had to order a whole new structure, it's 3 weeks out minimum. So that really screws up the phasing and the timeline.
Yep.
Another point of contention is, regardless of why this had to be changed, let's say if an invert was missed by whatever or a number got transposed, if we were doing this under the original contract, it'd be $325 whatever a foot. And that would be what we were paying because it needed to be done from the start. So actually, the $17,000 savings is a savings, although it was an unanticipated expense in the first place, but it is a savings over what it could have been.
Right. So, Ed, tell me if I'm hearing you right. So it sounds like the line's going in well. They offered us a savings of 17,000 some for the work that they're doing because it's new work, not because it wasn't in the plan. But you just were saying that if things continue to go well, then they'll might be done with it tomorrow, or in short order after that. I mean, is that an argument for going for the forced? What did you call it? You called it a forced
account.
Yeah, forced account payment for it, or I mean. I hear what Tim's saying or Tom's saying, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I just want to make sure I'm hearing you right.
Yeah, I guess it's more so me trying to lay out the facts of what I see happening in the field and what my estimate on how long it's going to take. Like I said, I can't put an exact figure to what my estimate of what the cost with forced account would be at this point. But I do view it as going well. So I'm not necessarily recommending that over the $17,000 discount. That's, I guess, more so for the city council to decide if that's an acceptable discount and move forward with that.
Right.
I guess I'm just trying to provide as much information to inform your decision as I can.
So the decision that we do have the decision that we have in front of us is basically, what are we going to do? What are we going to do about this? Like, how are we going to process payment on this new work that has been added to the project? So that's the question. We have two options about how to do that. Does anybody I suppose we just have to start the conversation on that and see how that goes.
Yeah, Jay. Yeah. And thinking about what the options are, we can accept the 325 or whatever that top rate is, or we can accept their offer to reduce that by 17,000 and end up at 234, or we can take the gamble, which it could end up cheaper or it could end up more expensive. And I'm more inclined to say, let's take their offer and, the project's moving along, it's going to get done. We might save a little bit, but we also could, end up paying a little bit more too, if we go to the forced account. So I'd be willing to accept their offer and make sure we got it done at a reduced rate and accept that $17,000 savings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say as well. I guess the one question I maybe had about it was, that with that amount, what happens if I'm assuming they're not going to hit ledge rock, but what happens if they hit rock? Does that change anything?
So they have hit a little bit of rock so far with it, is what I was reported, but we were already tracking the ledge rock with force account due to the random nature of it. So I guess in my opinion, that is a separate deal that we are tracking, the force account on the rock excavation. And from what was explained to me by chief inspector, that wasn't much of a hang up today. They got the hammer in there, hammered out the bit of ledge rock that they needed to, and it went really quickly. So,
Okay.
I would agree with Ed on that. If we hit ledge rock, we'd track that by force account separately.
yep.
Okay, good to know.
I'm more or less in favor of moving ahead, Jay, and accepting the discount. I guess I'd rather fight a lot harder for bigger dollars if that comes along, which there is definite potential in the project of this magnitude. So that's kind of my thought is, while we don't know which way it could go, at least we're guaranteed a $17,000 savings right now, and I'd rather fight harder on something else than on this.
All right, so with that discussion concluded, then I guess we're at a point where I would entertain a motion for a decision on this payment. Anybody?
I'll make a motion to approve the renegotiated price for the additional work that needs to be provided on the project.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second for that?
I will second that.
All right. So the motion and a second. Any final discussion on that? Hearing none. All right, we'll go through the roll call vote. Anton, your vote?
Aye.
Kelly, your vote?
Aye.
Tim, your vote?
Aye.
And my vote is an aye as well. So the motion passes. Thank you guys for coming out and explaining that to us and getting us a little bit more up to speed on that. We appreciate all the updates and making sure that we know we have the information necessary to make decisions on this. So I think that concludes for you guys. So if you want, you can sign off, and we'll talk to you next time. Hopefully there won't be any next time.
Thanks for joining us, Tom.
Thanks all. Yep.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, thanks. I'll head out. Just real quick, the water lines that we did put in all passed their bacteria and pressure tests, and they're all active now. So what they've done so far is working, and it's been good work. So
Good.
at least I'm happy with that.
Glad to hear that.
Good to know. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
All right, so we're going to move along then to Resolution 2020-05. So what we have in front of us here is the result of Governor Walz's Executive Order 20-74. So this calls for agencies, municipalities, etc., to create plans for like a COVID-19 preparedness plan. There are a number of templates out there that we've worked with. The reason why this is coming, that we're taking a look at this, is because this is going to be a pretty essential policy plan that that's going to come into play when we have a pandemic situation like the COVID-19 situation, that will help us to direct how we react to it. So hopefully you all had a chance to read through it, and I'm wondering if anybody has any questions about it. To me, when I looked through it, it looked pretty reasonable, and the plan breaks down in very specific terms different areas of concern for a pandemic like this in the different departments that we have. So I'm wondering if anybody has any questions to this. Really, all we have to do is approve this as a policy. Policies are always something that we can do to that we can tweak as we need to, but these are here to help us operate more efficiently in a situation like this coming up again. So, thoughts, Kelly?
I see that a lot of it, was brought through kind of the League of Minnesota Cities and everything. I'm just wondering if Chris had a chance to look at it, if there's anything he thinks we're missing, or if this covers what we need to cover.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Yeah, I'm painfully familiar with these at this point. So it's kind of the typical thing that cities are doing, and I think the reality of the plan is that as things change, you'll have to change the plan to deal with whatever circumstances arrive. So you have, I think, a plan that would be a placeholder at this point, and obviously it's a plan that can be worked from if it needs to change in the future.
Right. It still provide us a bit of a shorthand so that when things do happen, we already have a framework and a familiarity to operate within, and we can adjust it as necessary for the particular situation that's happening. Any other comments? Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, just a question for Mike. I read through it and it seems pretty thorough. All the departments seem to have contributed or at least had some involvement with that. Do you see any, administrative issues or things that we should be aware of that, might come back to us?
Well, first of all the departments were deeply involved in it. Generally, the department heads are the ones that were preparing these plans for their own functional areas. And, I'll also point out that a lot of changes have already been made to our policies of how we're dealing with this. And I think the council's been party to some of those conversations during our weekly meetings. The only real administrative thing I'd say to be aware of is that the resolution is also authorizing me with the department heads to make further changes to these policies as things eventually need to be adjusted. Particularly as our operations are changing, as we open more hours or to more customers, or we're providing different services, that we may make some tweaks to these. And I think that as those tweaks become significant policy questions, they'll probably be something that we'll bring back to the council as part of our emergency updates. And if they're not really significant, we probably won't bring them back up.
And that was my question, or one of my questions was, at what point does it trigger, does the modification or the application of this policy trigger, bringing that information before the council? So that was the question that I had.
And I guess maybe I didn't answer it very clearly because I'm not sure we'll know it until we see it. But we haven't normally risen to the level of having the city council pass a resolution authorizing an operational policy like this. One of the reasons that we are doing it is because the League of Minnesota Cities is recommending that city councils need to be approving these. And since they are also our insurance provider, that seems like a worthwhile step for us to take.
Yeah, I'd want to thank all the department heads that have contributed to make this possible, and I'm willing to at this point make a motion to approve the is it ordinance resolution? Resolution. Yes.
All right, so there's a motion for resolution 2020-05. Is there a second for that resolution?
I'll second it.
Okay, motion and a second. Any further discussion on it? I think if we operate under an understanding that that the council will be brought up to speed with changes that have been made, then I think that's probably the right place for us to start at, and then we can of course modify that as we have more of an understanding about what rolling out more normal services look like, and the risk from risk assessments look like. Anyway, That's my comment. I would like to have that kind of an update.
I agree, Jay.
Any other discussion? Any other conversation? All right, seeing none, we'll go through the roll call. Anton, your vote.
Aye.
Kelly, your vote.
Aye.
Tim, your vote.
Aye.
And my vote is aye as well. So the resolution passes. And we will move on to Seagull Management. So did all of you get the document that was sent out this afternoon? It was emailed out. It was
I got it.
a scan of the federal fish and wildlife permit for management of seagull populations. So I've had a few members of the business community, the downtown business community, approach me and request that this get put on a city council agenda. And it took some talking to kind of figure out why, but I think we finally figured it out. So so there are some business owners downtown, a growing number of business owners downtown, who have some serious concerns about the number of seagulls. This is something that we've heard in the past a great deal. And also these are herring gulls. The herring gulls are a protected shoreline species, so you can't just go and get rid of them. So what these business owners are proposing is they're proposing that that either the business owners are going to apply for their own businesses, or they'll form a group and apply as a group for the management of the gull nests that are on their facilities. And they asked for our support, or at least our assistance in applying for that permit and getting that permit. Now, that doesn't mean anything financially. It just means, to me, it means that we can sign on to that permit by saying, like, yes, we see that this is a valuable management concept, and that there's a lot of seagulls, and there's too many seagulls. So there's a lot of conversations in here about, are there too many seagulls? What is the right way to manage these birds, and and all of that. So I hope that I did an okay job of introducing that. I can continue to explain more if you guys if that would benefit you. Otherwise, if you feel like you've got a decent grasp on it, we can start a conversation about what the level of involvement that the city should have in this management effort. So, Tim?
Yeah, we saw an application or a permit from Security State Bank. Are there other applications or permits that are being contemplated that we haven't seen?
Well, this one is from 2012. So this is the last time that they applied for a permit, and you'll see that it's really interesting the way that this is the way that this is executed is that you can either remove the birds or you can remove the nests, and a certain number of them. So I feel like the three major businesses that I've heard from have, a limited number of nests on their roofs. If they were able to count up those nests and then propose, this is how many nests are on our roof, we would like to take down this many of them, then that would give the agency here, the Fish and Wildlife Service, something to draw on. And basically what the business owners are looking for is they would like to have the city say, yes, we think that this is a good idea.
I mean, I have firsthand seen, what kind of condition exists over at Security State Bank, the upper floor at Beth's Fudge. The windows look right out onto the roof where those gulls are nesting, and over the years I've seen the damage. They've deterrents. They've number of owl fixtures placed on the roof. They have spikes that are placed in strategic locations. They even replaced their roof with a metal roof, hoping that would solve part of the problem. And the nests are still there. Every vent is a place where they just want to congregate and build. And it's a problem, and I think rightfully so. The business owners have tried to do a lot, and I think are feeling frustrated with the lack of ability to control the gulls and the damage that they do to their buildings. So I'd like to see us try to work with those businesses and give them some help to try to eliminate or minimize this problem.
All right, thanks, Tim. And one suggestion that was given was that the city take this on more specifically to say that that the city would work with the Fish and Wildlife Service to create expectations for how people would manage the gull nests on the roofs of their buildings. And I think that would be really, really difficult. I don't think that's necessarily the way we should go forward with this. I think that if the council issues a statement in support of businesses that want to do this on their own business, on their own property, and is willing to include that letter with the applications of these businesses to the Fish and Wildlife Service, then I think that would be the most convincing thing that we could do, and the most effective thing that we could do to encourage action on this in a reasonable way. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at it wrong, but what do you guys think?
Well, I'm also wondering, besides, I want to support the businesses, but I think they're looking for us to really, somebody stopped me at the grocery store and talked to me at length about it, asking us to kind of take a forefront, because it's not just businesses, it's our visitors on the street, people who are, cars are being dirtied, obviously, whether they're staying down there, people that are having things dropped on their head. One of the things that used to happen years ago, obviously, I don't know what everybody calls it now, but we used to call it Seagull Island when I was growing up, and that would be the west breakwall in the harbor, where in the rocks out there, most of the seagulls used to go build their nests and have their babies in the spring. It's become such a tourist attraction, and so many people are out there, that I'm wondering if we as a city can't do something to block it off, or to put signage out there and ask people to refrain from going there till maybe the end of June because of that. We're never going to get rid of all the seagulls, but if we let them have their habitat, maybe they're going to stay off of some of our buildings, and we encourage that. Obviously we're not going to patrol it and police it, but maybe we need to give that area back to nature a little bit. Just a thought.
Well, and that's a really good point too. In talking about the, I know this isn't exactly the area that you're speaking to, but if you looking at the plan for the boat launch down in the rec park, there is some reclamation of land on the shore down there that's going to be done, and that land would be prime seagull habitat as well. I think seagull nesting habitat as well. I think the bottom line for this is that the birds have, they're not nesting where they should be nesting, or where they naturally would be nesting, and that's impacting it's impacting the businesses on which that they're nesting. So that's that.
I just see a lot of Mother Nature's creatures. I mean, having beaver in the harbor, you know, we have several fox families in town. Deer are now in town where I didn't feel like as a kid we didn't have deer hanging out. Now they're wandering through up and down the streets. And I just kind of think some of this natural habitat needs to be given back to them a little bit. In trying to let the businesses not be destroyed and have to pay for all these things that, you know, we as people are kind of pushing them out. So I think that we can kind of support our businesses by trying to at least, I'm all for removing the nests and doing what we need to do, but then hoping that they kind of go back to the habitat that they belong in.
Yeah, so I guess if I'm hearing you right, what you're saying is that it's more than just removing the nest. It's also trying to encourage them to go to a different spot instead of just having them continuously go back and back and back and back and back.
Yeah, and I don't know how we do that. I don't think you can put down a landing strip and say, "Hey, come over here. We'll leave you alone."
This is Seagull Island.
Yeah.
You know that?
We'll put a sign on that west little lighthouse. But yeah, they used to do there all the time, and as kids, we avoided it because they would dive bomb. They get pretty mean. So,
Right, Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Kelly. I mean, I think one of the reasons why they are nesting in places that they didn't used to nest is because their habitat has been disrupted. And I mean, if we could reclaim that west break wall, it might alleviate some of the problem. At least gives them natural habitat to build their nests. Doesn't mean that the business owners still aren't going to have the problem, you know, but at least it provides an option. And I think it's one of the things the city can do to help support those businesses and saying, hey, we're trying to restore habitat, you know, rather than just trying to eliminate the nesting, because the nesting is going to happen somewhere.
Right, and we're not going to get rid of seagulls. Like, I think that this is more going to be a relocation of the seagull population rather than like really an elimination of them. There's no way we would be able to impact that population significantly, I don't think. Yeah, so maybe the thing we do right now is we encourage those businesses to go for their applications. We're willing to offer a like a letter, you know, of support or something like that. This is all just a suggestion, of course, and then we can start looking at potential conservation and other, you know, habitat situations that would be more appropriate for nesting for them than on the downtown buildings, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, I think going hand in hand with the letter of support that the businesses can use to, you know, give to Fish and Wildlife would be important. But I think that the tying of the conservation piece is a good aspect of that. I mean, it seems like a pretty simple couple signs out there on that access, right? That's a nice thing about it being what it is out there. You know, it's not a mile-long swath you have to cut off. I mean, messing with nesting sites of migratory birds is, you know, that's illegal. And so if you put that out there, you're still going to probably have people out there, but hopefully it cuts the numbers back, at least, you know, like Kelly said, for these first, you know, month or so of summer and until they can get out of there, and hopefully it has an impact. So, and then how in the world do you shoot a shotgun in downtown Grand Marais?
Yeah, I find that comical, but I don't think that's an option.
That's the only option for killing them that they gave on the permit.
Right.
I mean, you can destroy the nest, but as far as taking, unless I missed something there, but I thought that's what it said is, you know,
That was 8 years ago, though, too. You have no idea what their new thoughts are.
Well, I would hope that their new thought is that you can't shoot a gun inside a city limit. But
Well, luckily, it's not up to them. Your ordinance says there can't be discharge of firearms in the city limits.
perfect.
Okay, well, that's all I don't know how we craft that, but I think we should.
Yeah, I'm not sure quite either. I don't know if, Mike, you have any suggestions, or if that's something that I can just come and work with Patrick on writing some language down, and then council, do you want us to, or would you like to see that before we issue it, or is that something that that we can just distribute to whomever is a business owner and wants to apply for the permit?
I think you guys can figure out how to send a support letter on behalf of the city.
Okay.
I don't know if you can send us a copy or not, or if that has to only, or include it in a packet just for information, but otherwise I'm fine with you guys doing it.
Yeah, we could do that.
I'd be fine just seeing a copy of it. So, I mean, I don't think we're going to get 42 letters, requests for the letter like next week. But, I mean, if we have it, if we can take a look at it, and if any of us have anything to offer up for suggested changes, then I think that's great. Then it's there and ready to hand out when somebody wants it.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
All right. Oh, go ahead.
that too. So yeah.
All right, so I will. I'll sit down with Patrick and we'll work out some language, and we'll get that available and sent out to the businesses that I've been in touch with that are thinking about applying, and we'll go from there. So, all right. So now is the time where we're going to bring back the open forum. So I don't know which one we want to start with. Oh,
Jay,
yeah.
Can we skip back? We didn't talk about ordinance 2020-01 when we were talking about the COVID stuff. Can we do that first?
Right. I even wrote that down, and I just bulldozed right through it. Yeah. So we received a request from the Grand Marais Business Coalition to extend the sidewalk dining ordinance till August, and that's that's their request. So does anybody have any strong feelings about that, or any discussion for it?
I'll just give you a quick update. We have one business in the downtown area that's actively using this, the Blue Water. Grand Marais also requested and submitted a plan, and they actually have a license to serve alcohol in the right of way as well from us, but they're not currently operating. And then the Hungry Hippie Tacos and Fisherman's Daughter also notified us that they'll be setting up tables in the right of way, even though it's not our right of way. They're also doing that. They're not providing any service out there, but the tables are in front of the takeout where they're providing takeout alcohol. So, that's kind of a strange gray area, but I think that's the only businesses that are currently using the ordinance. And from what I can tell, they would probably continue to use it as long as we'd allow them to.
Has anybody heard any feedback? Negative or positive? I mean, I honestly have not been downtown really to experience it, but I guess I'm just wondering if anybody's heard anything.
I've gotten some thank yous from some of the businesses that are using it, saying that it's not much, but it's something. So that's that's something. That's all I've heard. I haven't heard anything negative about it.
When we passed the ordinance, I was the one that was kind of trying to put that, June date on there to kind of give us a chance to see how it was working. And, I feel comfortable with what I've seen. There's crowds downtown. They need a place to eat. Blue Water is providing that service. They can't get as many people inside. So if they can do it outside and other restaurants can take advantage of this, I think this summer we need to provide as much opportunity for businesses to, do business that they can while people are here. So, I mean, I would support an extension following the request of the downtown group.
So is that a motion?
I could make it a motion if there's no other conversation at this point.
Well, we'll have time for more conversation too, but if
All right, well, I'll make a motion then that we extend our, our ordinance to the end of August. And maybe we should be extending it to the end of the season, and not even have it come back to the council, because if it really hasn't been a problem now, I'm thinking that it's not going to be a problem through the rest of the summer. And I guess if it is, we can address that and what the problems are. But I'll amend that motion to say, take it through the end of October.
Okay, there's a motion.
I would
Mike?
recommend actually that you just make the motion to amend that section 6 and remove the second option that has a date at all, and just have it expire when the emergency expires. And for the reasons that you already said, Tim, that there aren't any problems, we're not expecting any, and if there are any, we can always come back and revisit that or deal with them.
Chris is nodding his head too, which is always a good sign.
Well, even if we terminated it at the end of the emergency, those businesses I think are still going to be suffering through this season, and I think as much opportunity as we can give them to kind of recoup whatever they can financially would be of benefit. So extending it all the way through the season to me is a gesture that we can do that goes just a little bit further. So I would continue it to say to the end of October.
Just as another point to think about with that, the ordinance that you passed was using the emergency, particularly in the process that you used to pass it. And so it may not be appropriate to extend what's in the ordinance beyond the emergency without going through a different process to adopt the ordinance. And I think that if for some reason the emergency is repealed by you before the end of the season, that at that time you could consider another ordinance that would provide this very same permission for folks to use the right of way for the rest of the summer. But I'm going to be awfully surprised if the emergency is over by then, to be honest.
So that's an argument for just removing the expiration date until the emergency is over, correct?
Yeah, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong about that, if that's not the right option.
No, I mean, I think that's a reasonable option. I agree with Mike's assessment. I mean, I think the reality is that you're probably going to still have that emergency declaration in place for some potentially lengthy period through the fall. So, I think the reality of this is that, this disease is going to be around for a while, unless there's a vaccine that becomes available. So, if you want to, I mean, either works. I think what Mike is suggesting is a little cleaner. And the reality is it's your ordinance. So if you don't like it at some point and you want to make a change, we'll just make a change to it at that time.
And my attitude is I just want to try to do is what we can to let our businesses know that we're trying to help them out in a way that we can help them out. And if it's a matter of changing the language to reflect the emergency ordinance, or adding an additional timeline or additional ordinance on if the emergency goes away, just to recognize that we want to try to help our businesses in ways that we can. So I could go either way. It's the intent is to really just provide some assistance to the businesses.
And in actuality, either way, the result is the same. You know, if we say we extend it to August and, you know, or the end of the emergency, whichever comes first or something like that, it's the same result as if we just eliminate the date altogether and say till the end of the emergency. I mean, honestly, I would agree with Chris that I think that it's a little bit cleaner to have the language read, you know, until the end of the emergency, because that's more specific to the goal that we're trying to accomplish. But you know, that not to say we couldn't, you know, go back and look at it again and, you know, and make modifications as necessary. So it's up to you if you're making the motion.
I'm glad we could have this conversation about a motion. And I will make a motion then to extend the ordinance till the end of the emergency.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second? Anybody?
Yep.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Can we put a rider on there for? Go ahead, Kelly.
Oh, sorry. I just have a quick question. Since the Hungry Hippie Taco and Fisherman's Daughter don't actually fit under the city ordinance, but they are open, are they following the rules then of like garbage cans and different things, or is waste just, you know, a problem for the people who eat there and take food outside? Because I do want to make sure that that's covered.
I haven't gone and looked, so I will do that right away just to be sure. But they have been advised of what all the conditions were that were included in the ordinance.
Okay, that was my only concern. I was hoping maybe they were putting garbage cans out.
Great. So there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Anton, your vote?
Aye.
Kelly, your vote?
Aye.
Tim, your vote? Oh, we couldn't hear you.
Aye.
Okay, great. Gotcha. And I am an aye as well. So that ordinance is updated then. Motion carries. So now let's move on to the open forum items. Mike, is there one that you want to lead off with, or is it not really matter?
I'd love to lead off with Michael Gary's note to you, because I think, you know, a nice softball right away and get you warmed up is the way to go. Not to say this isn't a complicated one, but is everyone familiar with the spot that he's referring to in his letter? So I'll just give you a little background, assuming you do want to talk about it. And the 2nd Street was vacated in the late 90s by the city council. They went through what would potentially be a legal process where they held a public hearing and notified some group of folks, although I can't imagine it would include everyone who would feel like they were affected by it, because even at that time, that was a pretty heavily traveled pathway. The reason that they talked about that vacation was because the house on the north side of the right-of-way wanted to build a deck, and that house was already inside of the setback requirements, and the deck would have been awfully close to the property line, the right-of-way line. So the solution that the council at that time came up with was to vacate the street. That is an unfortunate solution because we really should never have vacated that right away in the first place. And I don't know how that council could have found that right away is not being and never would be used for the purpose it was intended for, because not only was it being used by the public for transportation, but it's being used by the city for utility purposes. It was then, and it has continued to be this entire time. So yes, it's been vacated. Those rights of ways are attached to the adjacent properties. But in the meantime, it's hard to understand how we wouldn't have an easement that crosses them certainly for our utility purposes and potentially for that pathway as well. And if you're interested in going down that road, that's something that I'd have to work with Chris on and develop a little more information for you.
Kelly?
What would happen if we ever wanted to put a street through there to actually, I mean, it's a goofy, there's a couple spots in town I can think of, that being one of them, where a street comes to an end only a block later to be picked up. I mean, what happens if we someday, or a council decides that they would like to put a street there?
Well, then that might be the first time that the city of Grand Marais has ever used an eminent domain. Of course, hopefully it wouldn't come to that. You could just negotiate some sort of agreement with the property owners, but that's the process that we would use. Is we'd contact the property owners, try and figure out what space we need and see if we could come to an understanding, and if not, then if you find that it's for a public purpose, we've got other options.
Yeah, so that's I don't know what the council feels like on this one, taking the temperature right now. If we were to get some more information on this from Chris and have him take a look at this specific case, I think that would probably answer a lot of questions, both from the public and from the property owners. But is this something that we want to pursue? I've received a number of complaints from both sides of this situation in the past, and I do feel like it would personally. I feel like it would be not a bad use of some of our resources to make sure that we have the right information being out there about this, and that we can work on getting something that works for all the parties involved, if that's possible. So I don't know what everybody else thinks about that, but I would be tempted to say, like, let's gather some information. So
Yeah, I would agree with that, Jay. I mean, I've been walking and biking on that former right-of-way for a lot of years. In fact, I was surprised when I saw the signs go up that it said it was private property. I was not aware that it had ever reverted from a city right-of-way. And knowing that there's city utilities there, I couldn't imagine how somebody would have made a decision to vacate that to private property. So I think there's a valid reason that should be a public right-of-way, and I think we should continue to pursue this in some fashion to see if we can open that back up as a public right-of-way.
Can I make it just a couple comments? Obviously, I don't know factually what was done in the 90s in terms of what they actually vacated. You know, if they just vacated the street right-of-way, because you can vacate a right-of-way and still maintain other uses. The key is, what were the uses that were actually vacated? If you still have utilities in that area, then there's an easement by prescription. Even if they vacated, it's an easement by prescription at this point, because you've got active utilities that you're utilizing within that area. So you've got at least an easement for utility purposes. So there's a public easement there. But, you know, that isn't necessarily a public easement for pedestrian use. You know, if you needed to have a road through there, you don't have an easement for road purposes, because at a minimum, you seem to have vacated that, or the city vacated that at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reality is, you know, going forward, if you wanted to acquire an easement, you would have to look at, what are you acquiring that easement for, and what easements do you still have in place? At a minimum, it seems that you have an easement for utilities, because you've already got utilities there. So that hasn't been extinguished. You know, in terms of the pedestrian use, that I think is more of a factual question in terms of what exactly was vacated in the 90s. And then obviously, if the determination is that use was extinguished, at least the pedestrian aspect use was extinguished as a right-of-way, then obviously, as Mike already pointed out, there are other ways to try and acquire that that use again, which would be to try to negotiate with the property owners for a strip of property that would be used for, trail or pedestrian purposes would be the easement, and or you condemn through an eminent domain process to acquire that easement. And obviously you end up having to pay it through a condemnation process. You would have to pay just compensation for the value of the strip of land that you're acquiring as an easement.
In regards to that, Chris, so if that was just vacated, depending on what comes up as it gets looked into a little more, which I'm in support of doing, if there was no, well, I suppose it's probably changed with property ownership change. I'm just thinking, like, if there was no compensation paid when, it's not like the city sold that when it was vacated. It's not like there was money exchanged on that side. But now if you're going the other way, there would have to be some sort of something.
Yeah. Yes. It's one of the things when I have discussions with cities about them vacating a right of way of some sort, there's always a discussion with the engineering folks about, okay, so we're pretty sure we don't have any future use for this at all, right? And if the answer is no, we don't, then obviously you should vacate it. If it's yes, we do, or yes, we do for these particular purposes, then you vacate the street use, but you reserve the other uses for your easement. So again, it really depends factually on what occurred back then, what sort of documentation exists, what did they actually do? I don't know what kind of written record we're going to have related to that. So obviously, yep. And so obviously city staff's going to have to try to take a look at all that and then see, if there's something in the files on it that we could take a look at and, hopefully see kind of what are the facts, I think is what we have to determine first.
I did notice it was in the pedestrian plan that we put out as a walk-friendly corridor.
All right. Yeah. So, I'm seeing lots of nodding heads. Is that something that we want to have them take a little bit more a deeper look into, gather some information, bring back to the council? Okay, we'll do that then. All right. So, Mike, which one? Do you have another one that you want to talk about, or should I just jump into the others?
Yeah, they're all yours.
So, I feel like the COVID-19, there's been a lot of people that have been reaching out to me asking if the city council can do anything to encourage both visitors and businesses to encourage more thoroughly or practice more thoroughly, face coverings and other social distancing practices at their businesses. I'm not certain there is. I've looked through some sample ordinances from other communities about social distancing and face coverings, and they seem to be laden with holes and require a great deal of enforcement energy, which we don't really have. Chris, I don't know if you have the ability to speak on ordinances like that, and or some theories or possibilities of things that the city can do to encourage the right behavior as we go through this. Because we did just do this COVID-19 preparedness policy or preparedness plan, which speaks to a lot of this stuff. So,
in terms of, a city taking actions to, put in place regulations that would require something like this, I think that would be difficult to do. I think that's part of the reason why, with the executive orders from the state, there's, the guidances or the recommended procedures are, to have face coverings. And so, the state, I think, has chosen not to do that. I don't really see a lot of guidance in any of that for local governments in terms of utilizing that as a mechanism for doing this. I mean, we have the statutory authority to put in place ordinances, for the public health, safety, and welfare. As you indicated, Jay, doing an ordinance like this, I don't know if other communities in the state of Minnesota have actually done ordinances like this. I haven't heard of any cities doing that, but I don't know that for sure. Like I said, I mean, I think it's something that would be difficult to enforce. The other part of it too is what I would refer to as the, sort of social contract that we've all entered into related to this, which is, these businesses that want, to do this. I mean, I think that it is somewhat incumbent upon them to, manage their own facilities, from the standpoint of, posting signs basically saying, face coverings required. And if people come in without face coverings, you politely ask them to put a face covering on. I mean, I think that's probably more of what this comes down to. I mean, I think the city can certainly, and I think you already have, I think at one point, put out, I forget what it was, a proclamation maybe or something to that effect that was encouraging the use of face coverings. So I don't see a lot of something that we could really realistically put an ordinance in place. I mean, certainly we could try to craft some kind of ordinance and put it in place, but I think it would be more of a political statement than it really would be something that would be enforceable. I'm not sure that the sheriff's department is going to be out there, citing people and wanting to go around and, try to cite people because, well, they're, closer than 6 feet or, something like that. I mean, the reality of the executive orders is that they're already a misdemeanor violation of the executive orders but I don't think there's the kind of legal authority in there that you could really enforce face coverings within those. So I know that was kind of a wide-ranging answer, but I don't know that there's a really good solution for this.
Yeah, I think that's been what I've found too. I think that we all just need to continue to push that narrative, and make sure that people continue to understand that this is an expectation. What I've seen in my business is that when we first started opening up, there weren't very many people who had masks, or if they did, they just totally didn't think about it. And then when as soon as they came into the shop, as soon as I put my mask up or, covered my face, then they all were like, oh yeah. And they would grab their masks and put them on. So I think that that's more what we need to do is we need to kind of encourage it on that situation.
I mean, in the metro here, everybody wears masks. I mean, you go into a store, everybody's got masks on. I talked to some of my relatives who live in greater Minnesota, and the opposite is the case.
Correct.
People are not wearing masks. And, now again, the prevalence of the disease is pretty high here in the metro area. And obviously in a lot of parts of the state, there hasn't been a lot of incidents of disease. So I'm sure that's driving a lot of this.
Yeah. So I don't know if there's much more that we want to say on that. Does anybody have anything to add on that? Okay, so then I'm going to move on to the last one that I had, which is basically a question asking what is the city's response to the current call for institutional reflection and change having to do with the murder of George Floyd and the I guess you could say, the realization that there is systemic racism built into our systems, whether we see it or not, and how is the city going to work to respond to that? Now, I will preface this by saying this is something that we could do a month-long retreat and work every day from sunrise to sunset for a month and still just barely scratch the surface on this. That's my personal take on it, but I also feel like there are things that we can do to start reflecting on how the institution, the city organization, does its work. And I think we find ourselves in a pretty interesting position, taking on this recodification of the city code, and being open to revision. That we could find ourselves in a very useful position for trying to reflect on the language that we use, reflect on the way that policies are built, to make sure that they are as purposeful as we possibly can, as well as how we choose to execute policies throughout the through the city. What's our relationship with the sheriff's department? All of that sort of stuff. So I'm not proposing anything for today, but I am inviting the council to begin to think about this. I think that this is something that we should spend some time on. We need to really keep this in the back of our head as we're making decisions going forward, so that we can make sure that we're being responsible about that and acknowledging what the unintended consequences of those decisions are. So that's my little spiel on that. I don't know if anyone else has anything else to say on that topic. Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I had a conversation with Mike about this too, and I agree with you, Jay, that we could get mired down, and this could be a conversation that just goes on and on and on without any resolution. But I think my thought is that we need to take advantage of resources that might be out there, whether it's Minnesota cities or others that have already started to talk about these things. And because I really don't know where the starting point for this conversation is, but it seems like it's important to have some kind of a conversation and start to think about if there are systemic issues with regard to racism that we're not even aware of, that we should have some way to address those, or look at those and try to deal with those. And Mike said, maybe he could talk to the League of Cities. Maybe there's other resources out there too that could provide some assistance. Maybe other communities are already ahead of this game. We could try to see what they're doing. But I would like to have a conversation that is purposeful and addresses this issue, and let the community know that this is something that's important.
I guess I think that there is opportunities for us. I think I'd be interested to know what Mike knows about, as far as obviously there are educators out there. And I think for us as leaders in our community, it's important for us to try and understand. I don't think that any of us would consider ourselves racist, but I think we all have that's not quite enough. It's not just being not racist, right? It's being anti-racist, and we have a great amount of control, and we have a good ability to actually make positive change. I mean, I do think racial justice goes right hand in hand with environmental justice, and I think the steps that we've made through green steps and through some of the maybe more progressive ideas and plans that we've tried to work on, I think are important. But I think like being able to see that connection, I think the housing study and what that means. I talked to my friends in the cities, and the deeds on their houses, I mean, they can't sell their homes to like black families. I mean, it says it right on the deed.
Right.
I'm not sure like if redlining exists in Cook County or within Grand Marais. But again, I think there's a lot of questions. I think it would be good for us as a council to be educated by somebody. I think it's worth bringing somebody in to do that. And I also think it's important for city staff to go through that, because they're the daily interaction, the daily, the face of the city. And, I mean, honestly, I think it would be a really good step forward for the city to offer that. I mean, it's a weird time to be doing it because obviously we're doing this all over computers right now. But to offer that up for people and for the public and for members of our community to engage in not only the conversation, but also the educational aspect of it, I think it would be really important. And yeah, I think it's made me more interested in, oh boy, I haven't gotten, I guess I've heard things about more right-of-way issues and property access and things in relation to like Passion Pit area in the past week or so, which of course falls in the city of Grand Marais, and that is all indigenous land that was taken. That's Chippewa City. There's, I think that impacts of, we all have to understand where we are. I mean, I guess the whole country, but I mean, particularly here, with our neighbors up in Grand Portage. I mean, I think it's just important to make sure that we can have open dialogue with them, but also that we need to be educated as who we are to try and understand better what impediments there might be, whether and probably not on purpose, right? But think about the earlier easement conversation about vacating a street, right? I mean, that was the 1990s, and that was this like maybe silly thing. We don't know the details of it that happened, and now it's become an issue. What else is in our past in the city and decisions that were made that until something comes up, we don't even necessarily know about? So I just think it's important for us to be out there. I was, when COVID business started, the city didn't have anything on, like if you went onto the Grand Marais website, there was no sign that there was a pandemic happening. And there is now. I had asked Patrick about that, and there is links now to state and federal and county resources, which is great. And I think that we can do the same thing in this realm, that we can put information gathering resources out there for people that are trying to see what we're doing. I don't think anybody's expecting us to have answers, but I think that people are expecting us not to be silent and to try and come up with solutions that work for everybody. That's my take.
Thanks, Anton. And for me, part of my personal journey with this has had to do a lot with reaching out to the Grand Portage tribe and trying to just educate myself more about their reality and the history of Chippewa City and how that plays into Grand Marais. The irony of that is that this past weekend was when the state of Minnesota was going to do their indigenous training up in Grand Portage, which I, through force of will and just annoying people too much by continuing to ask when are we going to have something that we can attend, got myself invited to, but then was subsequently canceled because of COVID-19. Those kinds of trainings and having those resources available to our community, I think are really, really important. And I think there should be space created for that. I'm willing to advocate for that and have that be part of, just part of the way that I am in our community. in that case, I don't think it's gonna cause too much trouble to the city organization to do that. But I think that a lot of the impacts would be pretty significant. So so I guess that's me saying that I have an intention of working to partner with other organizations to provide experiences and trainings that would make would educate our population and our employers and employees more about the reality of other people that live either in our community or on the fringes of our community. So that's where I'm at with it. So for an open forum topic, that's a pretty deep one. But if there's nothing else that we want to discuss for the open forum, then I think that we can probably move on. Does that sound all right to everybody?
Yes, I would just say, Mike, what can you get back to us here, so that, because I feel like if we not obviously the liquor store and the city hall and all that stuff is very important, and I think that if we can find time to dedicate pretty large blocks of time to address some of those things, I think it's important that we also do this and find a way to be able to make that happen. So if you can check out some resources, I've got some stuff too that we could talk about.
Cool. We can just put our heads together on it. My computer is at 2% battery, and I feel like it might just die. Or if I drop out, somebody else finish the meeting. But we'll do council and staff reports quickly here and see what we've got. So so Anton, do you have any report?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Kelly, do you have any report?
I don't have a report. I just wondered how things were going at the liquor store with the opening. I'm hearing that we're closed on and off because of computer glitches with the credit card machine, internet lines. Can somebody update me on that?
Chris just came over and talked to me this afternoon, and me and Jeremy and the voice over the internet guy are going to meet with them tomorrow to discuss it, but I wasn't aware of it until this afternoon.
Because they were closed like Friday night.
Not ideal. Yeah.
I'll have to get back to you.
Okay.
Anything else, Kelly?
No, I'll let it go. I mean, it's stuff that we can do later.
Okay. Tim? Oh, you're muted.
There you go. You probably have seen that the burn site has been pretty much restored. They're finishing up the last part of that work today, and going to look like a gravel pad. Better than it looked. I don't think any of the business owners, property owners have any decisions yet. I've talked to a couple of them, and we're going to maybe try to get together and have a conversation, see what might transpire. But yeah, at least looking a lot better than it did.
Great.
That's all I have.
Thanks, Tim. Library board met on Monday. This is my report. Library board met on Monday, discussed budget. They should be bringing that to the council within the next month or so. And we also, when we approved the consent agenda, approved the hire of the assistant director. Her name is Kristen Wazeski. She is very dynamic, has a lot of great energy. I'm excited to have her on board at the library. So that's.
Well, I guess I'm in charge.
It was Jay.
What do you say, Anton?
I was just going to ask if she found housing, but he's gone now, because wasn't that part of what the issue was?
She's still looking if anybody's got any leads. She's been very active in working on that, but I think any help that we can provide is appreciated.
Okay. Anybody have anything else?
I'll put a quick plug in. Next week, the Planning Commission is meeting and they're holding a public hearing. It'll be a public hearing like this, which means we really hope to have input provided prior to the meeting. And of course, we'll also be asking for folks to provide input on an ongoing basis until you're done with the issue. But it's a big one. It's a re-look at the housing language in our zoning ordinance. And it's something that's been worked on for a number of years now that's kind of coming to a culmination. So if folks are interested or have any questions, folks that are watching, but also you, city councilors, reach out and expect to hear more about this at your next meeting.
Will we have, can you listen in silently and just to like for that hearing?
Yeah, it's been a live stream, just like these meetings are. And all of their previous meetings where they've discussed it have also been live streamed. And there's also a record of them that folks can go back and watch if they want to see how it's come to this point.
Okay. All right. So is the public comment aspect of it, I guess, though, is you want that written would be the best?
Well, that's what we've asked for, is for folks to provide any comments they have beforehand. If they, we'll make arrangements with anybody, however they want to make a comment. But the easiest way for folks to do it is to send an email or to provide something in writing that they'll deliver to City Hall.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, anybody else?
Where is that information shared, Mike or Patrick, so people know? Because I haven't seen it through Facebook or anywhere.
It's
Where
on,
would people hear about it?
it's on the city's website right now so the city website, ci.grand-marais/housing plan. And it's also been posted on Facebook and is running as like a YouTube pop-up ad right now. And will be in the newspaper, etc.
Okay.
That's awesome. I went through some of that. I mean, I didn't get through all of the changes and all the recommendations, but the little bit that I'd had a chance to look at it, I'll look more before next week. It's pretty neat. It's pretty exciting stuff. Okay, well, if nobody has anything else, then it's 8:15 and we'll adjourn. Oh, wait. Sorry. Is that too late? See what happens? What are we doing? Are we going to meet next week? Anybody?
I don't think we have anything that you need to talk about in an emergency setting next week. And we do have a bunch of other meetings going on that night. So my preference would be no, but we'll let you know if that changes.
Okay, so just plan on nothing right now unless we hear from you?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. I actually tried to go to the last week's meeting, but I was the only one, so it's all right. Okay, thanks everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Nah.
Good job. Good job, acting mayor.
Thanks, Tim.
Good night, all.